like this.
Yes, perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rhoda Fofack-Garcia from France Energy Marine. I'm a researcher in sociology of offshore renewable energies, and I will present a work on bridging the gap between governance and ecosystem modeling, a work carried out with Sibyl and Rui, with an expert in citizen engagement and marine spatial planning. A bit of context first. In Europe, the foundation of maritime spatial planning, MSP, is the concept of integrated marine policy, which aims to strengthen the balance between environmental protection and economic development. And the integrated marine policy relies on several European documents, instruments, including two main pillars: an environmental pillar, the Maritime Strategy Framework Directive, the MSFD, and the socio-economic pillar, the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, the MSPD, adopted in 2014. Since their adoption, member states have been required to incorporate them into their national frameworks. And in France, the implementation of these two directives is grounded in the integrated management of the sea and coastline, and has been carried out through a single document, which is the strategic document for the sea basin developed at the scale of each maritime facade. The strategic document brings together the environmental objective of the MSFD and the socio-economic objectives of the MSPD, adapting them to the specific characteristics and the needs of each maritime territory. And our case study is based on the case of the strategic sea basin document for the Eastern English Channel North Sea Maritime Facade adopted in 2019. And this area is characterized by the planned development of several new offshore wind farms, which brings many new challenges, particularly related to the coexistence with existing economic sectors and with environmentally protected areas. On the map, you can see in orange these are areas of offshore wind projects that are already operational or under study in the process of being allocated, that represent 4.5 gigawatts of offshore wind deployed. And shaded areas on the map are indicating zones suitable for offshore wind development in the next 10 years and by 2050, which is equivalent to approximately 26 gigawatts currently under planning. Key research questions that are addressed in this study are: what are the main challenges for maritime spatial planning in France, particularly in addressing environmental and socio-economic issues in the context of acceleration of offshore wind development? And what are the regulatory and operational planning needs? And above that, how to link MSP governance issues and the assessment of cumulative effects using the ecosystem-based approach. And this presentation does two things. It identifies the operational needs from the merging process of the two directives and proposes an ecosystem-based approach to address these needs, ending with key insights and perspectives. The analysis of the MSFD-MSP merging process is based on a document review of key components of the strategic sea basin documents, namely the strategic documents defining the baseline and objectives, and operational documents including the monitoring program and action plan. The document review is complemented by semi-structured interviews conducted with key stakeholders, public authorities steering or drafting the strategic document, as well as experts involved in good environmental status assessment. And the following grid on the slide provides the analytical framework that we designed to assess the strategic document's operational effectiveness. The lower part of the framework correspond to the strategic document itself, which defines the environmental objectives for each maritime seafront in order to achieve the good environmental status. And each environmental objective is associated with one or more indicators specifying what is being assessed and or to be assessed, as well as targets defined through values or thresholds used to evaluate to assess whether the objective has been achieved by the end of a cycle. If these thresholds values are not met, the environmental objective and their associated indicators are revised for the next cycle. So the analytical framework was applied to descriptor 1 on seabirds. For this descriptor, the MSFD identifies 5 criteria for assessing the achievement of the GES. And within the strategic document, each of these criteria is addressed through 5 monitoring subprograms. And the strategic document also defines several of environmental objectives aimed at achieving the GES. The analysis highlights a clear lack of linkages between monitoring and environmental objectives for 2 objectives, making it impossible to assess progress toward GES for these objectives and during the strategic document cycle. In particular, the environmental objective 2 is to prevent collisions between seabirds and offshore infrastructures, particularly offshore wind farms. And this objective is of particular relevance for offshore wind development. And the same analytical approach was applied to the 11 descriptors and 52 environmental objectives to identify the operational needs of the strategic document. And the strategic document includes 15 high-level pressure-based objectives translated into more than 400 strategic objectives, of which 16 specifically address interaction between environmental issues and offshore renewable energies. And regarding the effectiveness of environmental objectives, the analysis also reveals that there is a limited effectiveness of some environmental objectives due to weak links with GES, gaps in monitoring alignment, and a lack of operational assessment criteria, as well as unresolved methodological issues regarding how and by whom these gaps should be addressed. Integrate, in the side of integrated planning, it remains undermined by an imbalance between environmental objectives and socioeconomic objectives with limited reciprocity in their assessment and indications of delay consideration of socioeconomic objectives, raising the question of whether environmental objectives or increasingly offshore wind energy are becoming the primary driver of maritime spatial planning. And finally, the assessment of cumulative impacts remains largely non-operational within the strategic document. This leads us to raise the following key question I mentioned earlier. Which methodological approach should be selected to effectively link MSP governance issues with the assessment of cumulative impacts, cumulative effects within an ecosystem-based approach? To address this, the study undertakes a review of the main methods for cumulative effect assessment from 2017 to 2024 in order to identify their relevance and the applicability to maritime spatial planning. And amongst these approaches, the ECUM working group method, for instance, based on pressure receptor interactions and expert-driven prioritization. And you also have the bow tie method, which maps impact chains and identify potential pathway for cumulative effects. This study adopts the OSPAR Commission method, the bow-tie approach, to assess cumulative effects for a couple of reasons. First, it supports the analysis of causes and consequences of pressures affecting marine ecosystems. It also provides a sample schematic framework to map impact pathways from pressure to outcomes and to undertake control measures. You can see on the screen a schematic representation of the bow-tie method. The analysis starts from the central event or main phenomenon, and on the left-hand side, identifies the drivers and pressures along with the measure aimed at reducing them. And on the right-hand side, you represent the impacts and consequences on the ecosystem, as well as the measure aligned and designed to avoid, reduce, or compensate for these impacts. And these measures are based on the definition of scenarios that are both governance-specific and suitable for ecosystem-based models. An exploratory method for adapting the bow-tie method to the develop relevant scenarios is also was carried out. And this approach relies on 9 workshops conducted with researchers in ecological science and ecosystem-based approaches, as well as 5 interviews with researchers from ecosystem-based approach. And the process led to the identification of 18 scenarios. Among them, 8 scenarios are in capacity to complete regulatory indicators. They are, for instance, habitat loss scenario, ecological succession scenario, and a last one on biocolonization profiles. Some key messages to conclude. The NESTORE project and the method I presented should be scaled up across all French maritime seafronts, since we apply this to the Eastern English Channel North Sea. We also must benchmark against European MSP practices for the Belgium case study, for instance. We initiated a collaboration with Airbnb that we greatly acknowledge. And we also should strengthen the cumulative effect assessments by fully connecting OSPAR results to environmental issues. And in parallel, it is essential to actively engage with stakeholders to shape the regulatory framework. And finally, one key message is that we must develop robust, multi-scale, scenario-based decision support tools from this methodological framework. And thank you for your attention. Happy to have your question if you have any.